Now on KGW News at 11, protesters shut down the Burnside Bridge in Portland, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Plus, the Oregon Supreme Court takes up the voter-approved measure aimed at ending political walkouts, while lawmakers who didn't show up to session this year say they can't be kept from serving another term. And later, hear from the people helping to turn a concrete section of downtown Portland into a winter wonderland, complete with ice skating. And we begin tonight with protesters shutting down the Burnside Bridge while calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Brittany Folkers. The bridge was closed for 3 hours tonight before reopening around 6. Our Catherine Cook was there and spoke with organizers. Catherine.
Well, Brittany, they describe themselves as anti-Zionist Jews. They don't believe they need a nation state to exist. They're asking elected leaders around the country and here in Oregon to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Tonight, they did so while stopping traffic.
On this last night of Hanukkah, it feels like we're swallowed in darkness, searching for hope.
That search, it seems, led this group of Jewish anti-Zionist demonstrators to the Burnside Bridge Thursday evening. They blocked traffic while calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to Israeli occupation in Palestine. Also, they set up a 12-foot menorah and lit the 8th candle.
As Jews, we are here to say that we are rededicating ourselves to the Palestine movement. We are here to rededicate ourselves to the struggle to fight against oppression, to fight against this ongoing genocide.
Zia LaBouffe is a community organizer with Jewish Voices for Peace. Many consider it a polarizing group within the Jewish community. The Anti-Defamation League calls Jewish Voices for Peace radically anti-Israel and says their demonstrations and rhetoric have encouraged anti-Semitism.
Many people believe that we are not real Jews for speaking out against Zionism, but we believe that our Jewish values is what empowers us to speak out when we are watching oppression take place.
Ceasefire protests stopped traffic around the country Thursday night, including parts of Seattle. A coordinated effort by Jewish Voices for Peace to take 8 bridges in 8 cities on the 8th night of Hanukkah.
I hope that folks can look beyond the inconvenience to recognize the deeper roots of what's happening.
Catherine Petru's grandparents are both Holocaust survivors. She thinks of them when she looks to the Middle East.
There's a genocide going on in Palestine, and it requires all of us to reckon with how we got to that point.
In downtown Portland, Catherine Cook, KGW News.
Meanwhile, Israeli leaders have said they'll continue fighting in Gaza until Hamas releases all hostages taken during the October 7th terrorist attack and is no longer in power. NBC News reports 20,000 people living in Gaza have now been killed in the fighting. 1,200 people were killed in Israel during the October attack. More than 100 are still being held hostage. The United Nations is officially calling for a ceasefire, but the U.S. is still opposed to it. Instead, the Biden administration is asking Israel to stop with the large-scale ground campaign in Gaza and transition the fighting to a more targeted phase of the war.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives. Not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
Congress, meanwhile, has been debating a national security package that includes funding to support Israel as well as Ukraine in its war with Russia. Negotiators plan to work through the weekend on a package. The Senate's top Democrat says his chamber will delay holiday break and come back on Monday to vote. To get you caught up on tonight's other headlines, federal regulators say Starbucks illegally closed nearly 24 stores nationwide, including 3 in Portland. At the time, the company explained they closed these locations over safety concerns. But the National Labor Relations Board filed a complaint saying the stores actually closed due to union organizing. A hearing on the complaint is set for next summer. In the meantime, Starbucks is defending its decision, saying the closures were part of regular evaluations of its locations. Portland police are looking for the person responsible for a deadly shooting at an apartment in the Centennial neighborhood. This happened around 1:30 this morning near Southeast 165th Avenue and Bush Street. An ambulance rushed the man to the hospital, but he did not survive. And in Gresham, police are asking for tips about this pickup truck, which was stolen at gunpoint this morning. It's a red Chevy S10. Authorities say the owner left it running when he ran into his house to grab something. When he came back, the suspect pointed a gun at him and took off. The theft happened around 5 this morning on Northeast 192nd Avenue. There are new developments in a story that we've been following for more than a year now. Oregon's Measure 113 was passed by voters in an effort to discourage lawmakers from staging political walkouts. The state Supreme Court is now hearing arguments in a lawsuit that says the measure cannot bar lawmakers who walked out this past summer from serving another term. Evan Watson has a breakdown of the arguments from Salem.
Lawyers for a group of Republican senators and the Secretary of State presented their arguments to the Oregon Supreme Court today. Now the justices will decide whether a legal loophole in the wording of Measure 113 should allow the senators to stay in office for years to come, or whether they should be punished now for the walkouts this summer. One sentence, part of the actual text of Measure 113, could be enough to save Republican senators' political futures. That sentence: for the term following the election after the member's current term is completed. Senators believe that any disqualification from office would apply years from now because elections take place before terms end.
You should adhere to your precedents. You should not construct a new rule, and you should basically allow the legislature or the voters to fix the problem.
Senator Tim Knopp is one of the senators challenging the Secretary of State's ruling, barring him from running again in 2024.
I don't think that the state really has much of a leg to stand on here because the Secretary of State, through the DOJ, is interpreting this measure to mean something that it doesn't say.
Measure 113 was intended to dissuade senators from walking out on the job, stopping all legislative sessions without a quorum.
The ballot title caption, for example, which appeared literally right above the yes and no bubbles that voters filled in on their ballot, was unambiguously clear that this measure applied, that this disqualification applied for these legislators' next term of office.
But the attorney for the senators told the Supreme Court the ballot explanation got it all wrong.
These were just explanatory tools, and you know what? They were wrong. The arguments in the ballot title sold this measure based on certain assumptions that were wrong.
The Secretary of State's attorney argues it matters what voters read on their ballots.
Why should we treat those as more significant?
The reason why this court does not interpret constitutional text in isolation is because there is a significant risk that in doing so, it will subvert clear voter intent.
Now, Supreme Court justices will decide the senators' futures after they racked up more than 10 unexcused absences during the walkout this past summer.
Chief Justice, you asked, why did nobody notice this at the time? This was vetted by a lot of people. It went through a ballot title process, the voters' pamphlet statement. Nobody mentioned this until after the 2023 walkout was already underway. And I think that's telling.
So the big question, when will justices make their decision? A source with the Justice Department told me the expectation is that they'll fast-track this decision because of the impact it could have on upcoming legislative races. And Senator Tim Knopp himself says he expects to know by March when he would need to refile for the upcoming election in November. So the general consensus is by sometime in February, if not before. In Salem, Evan Watson, KGW News.
There's a new spot in downtown Portland aimed at lightening the load for homeless men and women. It's new storage space where they can leave their belongings knowing they'll be safe. A shipping container previously housed belongings along the waterfront, but this new space is much bigger and is open 7 days a week from 7 in the morning to 8 at night. It's located on Northwest 5th and Gleason. Outreach workers are also on site twice a week, connecting people with services. The city of Portland hired Central City Concern to run it.
So anything that can relieve stress off the community would probably help.
Not carrying so much weight on me, and therefore I can actually move around instead of stay stuck in one spot.
I think having a brick and mortar place that you can go to that's right here on Gleason Street is a much more dignified and probably feels like a more secure environment than a shipping container under the bridge.
That shipping container under the bridge was known to attract drug use in campsites. People are hoping things will be different at the new spot, since Central City Concern will be working with people on the site.